Question number 1. How soon can I sell recreational marijuana as an MMC?
The Department of Revenue is required to issue the license by January 1st, 2014, and if they don't, then it falls to the locality, and the locality issues you your license.
If Amendment 64 gives primary consideration for existing licensed MMCs, how will that affect most businesses since most have not been licensed by the MMED? Since the states have to actually issue a business license if A64 passes.
MMED is not part of this. They're going to have to create a new agency, and it'll be within the Department of Revenue unless the Department of Revenue changes into a different agency. It'll be part of that. It'll have to be a separate agency.
Question number 3, will I have to shut down my MMC, disassociate my license, and destroy my plants in order to be licensed as a recreational business because A64 does not allow an MMC and a retail marijuana store to operate on the same premise?
Yes, you can operate both out of the same store. Now, can patients come by from a retail store if they want to? Of course.
How many communities do you think will ban recreational marijuana sales, since over 91 communities have already banned MMJ sales?
To answer the question, who's going to vote it in and who's going to vote it out, it's going to be in large part what you're able to convince your elected officials and educate them, just like we did with 1284, as to whether or not it's a good idea based on a lot of rhetoric that their constituents that they listen to are going to be raising. So it's going to be all over the board as to who votes what and where and why, and it's going to be up to you to educate them.
You know, this is an intergenerational struggle, this drug war reform. This is a cultural war issue that some people view our community as a threat to their traditional way of life. And if you live in a town or county where this doesn't pass, that means you've got work to do. And, you know, it just gives us a snapshot of where we have to change opinions. And so I think that's what we can expect.
Will Amendment 64 allow out-of-state investment in recreational MJ businesses?
With this, there'll be no restriction on out-of-state loans or investment or even ownership in a marijuana store, as long as the marijuana itself does not cross state line.
It neither says no or yes to out-of-state.
How safe of an investment are recreational marijuana businesses given the federal status of marijuana and the blue sky ruling?
If you watched 60 Minutes last Sunday, you heard the Deputy Attorney General for the United States, Mr. Cole, basically saying, which kind of surprised me, if you're in strict compliance with state law, we're not going to interfere, basically. And I don't know that that's going to hold true if Mr. Romney gets elected president, because he'll replace anybody and everybody, such as Mr. Cole or others, that do not agree with his philosophy. And as Christian and I discussed, I think Romney has come out very clearly and said he's not in favor of it, despite the statements of Paul Ryan one afternoon or something that he was in favor basically of the continuation of the medical marijuana laws. The Republican Party does not support it. It's not on their platform, and they made it very clear the day after Ryan made his statements that that's not the position of the party. And, you know, obviously Romney sees himself as a conservative Republican, and to me that's not good for this industry. But
We really couldn't be any more in your face. We have 15 pages of advertising in every single week's Westward that comes out. It's right there. If the feds wanted a list of every single center, they could not even walk over the MMED. The MMED would fax them a list of every single center that exists, and the feds could methodically go through that. They haven't. And here's why they haven't done that: because of public opinion. That's the only thing that stops the feds, and that is going to continue. And if the voters of Colorado pass this Amendment 64, that is going to be a big message to the feds to back off and concentrate on what the American citizens want them to keep concentrating on. The feds lose the PR battle, and the feds do care what people think. They really do. They are answerable to elected officials, and they're answerable to the U.S. Congress, which is also elected. There's nothing right now that stops the feds from going after every single one of these other than public opinion. That's it, and it does stop them, and that's a potent blockage to the feds, and this is going to be even more of a blockage to them. So I don't think this invites the feds. I think it's the opposite. If it passes, it's a message to the feds to back off.
But I believe equally important is the issue of who's going to pay for this if they start the enforcement actions. The federal government has plenty to do beside chasing people in this room. They don't like this. They think this is a Mickey Mouse business. Unless you're transporting 100 pounds or whatever, they do not want to be involved. And quite frankly, I don't think they give a damn about public opinion. They never have. The feds are going to do what they want to do. And if people don't like it, too bad.
The bottom line is that what saves us is the regulatory model. It's not public opinion. They don't care about that. It's not how much it's going to cost them to enforce it. What they said on 60 Minutes, what they've always said is, we will go after people who use these laws as a ruse to black market distribute. We will go after California, who has no regulatory model, they do not have an explicit right to sell and be paid for marijuana in California. So of course they're going to go after that. The only thing that keeps them away from Colorado in a significant way is the regulatory model.
The regulatory system is a product of our elected state legislature. Every single one of those legislators was elected by people in Colorado. So the legislature does represent public opinion. They represent it quite strongly. I mean, they reflect what their constituents generally want. Obviously, there's a little bit lost in the translation, but in general, the feds look at our Colorado state legislature, these elected senators and representatives, and signed by the governor, the chief executive. That does matter. So even that regulatory model does reflect public opinion. And public opinion in Colorado, if this passes, could not be more clear that we want law enforcement to back off this harmless plant if this thing passes. That'll be the clear message that is sent to government at all levels.
Can out-of-state people can out-of-state residents just come in and if they're 21 years of age and just buy recreational marijuana? And if so, is that going to invite federal attention? And that's the real question, I think, here is between our recreational and medical model.
The bottom line is that I don't know if this is going to raise the feds' hackles or not. When you look at the Ogden memo that was passed back in October of 2009, or call it the Holder memo or whatever you want to call it, it said that the federal government wasn't going to use its resources to prosecute people that were in obvious compliance with state law. At that time, Colorado was under a caregiver model and under our Amendment 20. Since then, our legislature has passed a business model for the distribution of medical marijuana. I know that there was a little bit of pushback, and I'm sure that there were some issues between Mr. Walsh and Washington about what do we do now. The concern that I have, and this is my opinion only, is that I don't know at what point when you pass the next thing, which is recreational, when the feds all of a sudden say, okay, that's enough. We're not going to go farther with that. Quite frankly, we are tied to whatever whoever's sitting in the Oval Office at the time, and also we're tied to what their resources are. They obviously have other things that are much better to do. I think what we're seeing is that the government is beginning to recognize the use of medical marijuana as being beneficial. At least I hope they're beginning to see that. And maybe this would be the impetus to change how medical marijuana is viewed at the federal level. But, to answer a whole bunch of questions is, right now you're basing a business on whether or not the federal government is going to enforce a law that's in place. And so far, they've been very lax in Colorado. I know a lot of people attribute that to the level of regulation that's here as opposed to in other states. You see information coming out of California and they cry, well, why aren't you doing that in Colorado? And I think we can say because we're regulating it the way we are. So I'm the I don't know guy, because I don't know if this is going to be the tipping point for what the feds do. I agree with Mr. Dill. Those decisions come from a long ways away from our borders, and they are not necessarily based upon any kind of a fact. any kind of research or anything like that. It's based on public opinion and whether or not I'm going to be able to be a senator or representative or whatever next year, because it's a really cushy job, and God, I'd hate to lose that. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it causes me concern to think, if we keep going this way, what is the Fed's next step?
So no one knows. No one knows. Part of the reason that no one knows is because no one's ever done it before.
And my opinion is just plainly that they will go after people who knowingly push stuff out of state, who knowingly are reckless about it, but they're not going to come after the highest hanging fruit. They'll come after the lowest. And like Dill and everybody else said, I work in federal court. Those are 30,000 plant black market cases. That's a federal case. 3,000 plant illegal black market. That's a federal case.
If the application fee alone is $5,000, how much do you expect the state and local licensing fees will cost?
Section 5, subsection A2. The application fee shall not exceed $5,000. And the beauty of this is you don't have to pay your fee until you get that license.
Okay, 80% are going to either convert or apply for a new license. Then the state says they project that there will be 3,200 dispensary licenses applied for under the new Model 64. They also say that there will be 1,200 cultivation licenses.
Do we even have a medical industry? Is this going to save this new launch of recreational marijuana? Is that going to be the new start to an industry, or what's going to happen? What if Obama gets elected? We are going to face this. And so with these upcoming rescheduling of marijuana and our presidential election, where do we stand now?
Schedule 1 creates so many barriers. Banking, we have a hard time opening a basic checking account because it's Scheduled 1. And the Schedule 1 of marijuana has absolutely no validity, because Schedule 1 is defined as drugs that have no recognized medical benefit. Well, we recognize the medical benefit in our highest law currently, the Colorado Constitution, Article 18, Section 14. 17 other jurisdictions join us. The federal government itself recognizes the medical benefits of marijuana because the federal government itself distributes medical marijuana to patients across the country through the new drug investigational program. That's not as well known as it ought to be. Additionally, the President of the United States signed a piece of legislation that the current president legalizes medical marijuana in the District of Columbia, a federal enclave. So the federal government itself already recognizes the medical benefits of it, and numerous jurisdictions throughout the country recognize the benefits of it, and tens of thousands of doctors and scholars and studies, peer-reviewed, recognize the medical benefits of it. So I think ASA is going to prevail in its action.
If they reschedule it, you have to be a doctor to prescribe it rather than recommend it, and you have to be a pharmacist in order to distribute it.
To me, this falls under the category of be careful what you ask for, because you might get it. And what I mean is, okay, Schedule 2, sounds great, pharmacies, all of this, regulation by the FDA. All of a sudden, you're competing against Big Pharma. They swipe the market. They take it, because it's huge. It's gigantic. So I don't think anybody in this room wants to compete against Big Pharma.
And we need to start thinking descheduling rather than rescheduling. I mean, we just need to change our language.